Amara walked into Lincoln High School every morning with her eyes fixed on the floor. She had learned this trick during her first week of 9th grade. If she didn't look up, she didn't have to see the stairs. If she kept moving, she didn't have to hear the whispers. Her backpack, old and patched with duct tape on one corner, hung heavy on her thin shoulders. Inside were textbooks she couldn't afford to lose, and a lunch she had packed herself before her parents left for their morning shift at the factory. The hallways of Lincoln High were bright and clean. Posters about college and career days covered the walls. Students laughed and talked in groups, sharing stories about their weekends and making plans for after school. Amara moved through them like a ghost. She had 3 outfits that she rotated through the week. A pair of jeans with a small tear near the pocket that she had sewn closed. Another pair that was slightly too short but still wearable. A black pair that used to belong to her cousin. She had 4 shirts. 2 were plain and simple. One had a small stain that wouldn't come out no matter how many times her mother scrubbed it. The last one was her favorite, a blue shirt that still looked almost new. By Thursday and Friday, Amara knew the other students noticed she was wearing the same clothes again. She could feel their eyes on her. Some looked away quickly when she caught them staring. Others didn't bother to hide it. Once, she heard 2 girls giggling behind her in the hallway. One of them said something about shopping at thrift stores. The other laughed. Amara pretended she didn't hear. She had become very good at pretending. Her last class of the day was English with Ms. Henderson. Room 204 was at the end of the 2nd floor hallway. Amara always arrived exactly 2 minutes before the bell rang. Not too early that she had to make small talk with other students. Not so late that everyone would stare at her walking in. She had timed it perfectly over the past 3 months. She went straight to her seat in the back corner by the window. The desk was old and someone had carved their initials into the wood years ago. Amara traced the letters sometimes when she was nervous. Ms. Henderson was always at her desk when students arrived, looking through papers or typing on her computer. She was a tall woman with blonde hair that she wore in a tight bun. She dressed in neat blazers and skirts. Her shoes always matched her outfit. Everything about Ms. Henderson was perfect and organized. Her desk had labeled folders and color-coded pens. Even her handwriting on the board was perfectly straight without needing lines. The teacher had been at Lincoln High for 15 years. Everyone knew her. Parents requested her class because she was known as a tough but fair teacher. Former students came back to visit and thank her. Her walls were covered with thank you cards and photos from past classes. She had a reputation for pushing students to be their best. But Amara had learned that Ms. Henderson's version of best didn't include everyone. On Amara's first day in the class, Ms. Henderson had looked at the attendance sheet and paused at her name. She pronounced it wrong. When Amara quietly corrected her, the teacher's smile had been tight. She tried again but didn't quite get it right. After that, Ms. Henderson often just pointed at Amara when taking attendance instead of saying her name. Sometimes she called her by the name of another student who looked like her, even though that student was in a different class period. The small things added up over time. When Amara raised her hand to answer a question, Ms. Henderson's eyes would slide right past her to call on someone else. When group projects were assigned, Amara was always in the leftover group with other students no one picked. When the teacher handed back papers, she would place Amara's on the desk without comment while she praised other students loudly. There were the comments too. Little things that seemed harmless on the surface but stuck in Amara's mind like thorns. Once, during a discussion about college, Ms. Henderson had looked directly at her and said, "Of course, not everyone is college material. Some students are better suited for vocational training." Another time, when discussing a book about immigration, the teacher had said, "We should all be grateful to live in this country. Some people don't appreciate the opportunities they've been given." Amara had learned to stay quiet. Speaking up only made things worse. Once, she had tried to contribute to a class discussion about a poem they were reading. She had spent the whole previous night thinking about it, preparing what she wanted to say. She raised her hand and Ms. Henderson called on her with what looked like surprise. Amara explained her interpretation of the poem, how it connected to themes of identity and belonging. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Ms. Henderson said, "That's an interesting perspective, but I think you're reading too much into it. The poem is much simpler than that." She moved on to another student who said almost the same thing Amara had said. The teacher nodded enthusiastically. "Excellent analysis. That's exactly right. After that, Amara stopped raising her hand. She stopped trying. It was easier to be invisible, but being invisible didn't mean Amara had stopped thinking or feeling or dreaming. At home in the tiny apartment she shared with her parents and two younger siblings, she had a different life. Her family had come to America when she was 6 years old. Her parents worked hard, her father at a textile factory during the day and doing cleaning work at night. Her mother worked the evening shift at the same factory and took care of the home during the day. They were always tired, but they never complained. They told Amara and her siblings that education was the key to a better life. Amara believed them. She worked hard on every assignment, even when it felt pointless. She read every book assigned and many more from the library. She loved words and stories and the way writing could make her feel less alone. In her bedroom, which was really just a corner of the living room separated by a curtain, she kept notebooks filled with her own writing. Stories about girls who found their courage, essays about fairness and justice, poems about feeling invisible and wanting to be seen. Her little brother Miguel was 8 and her sister Rosa was 6. They looked up to her. Miguel wanted to be a scientist and Rosa wanted to be a teacher. Amara helped them with homework every night after she finished her own. She read them stories and helped them practice their spelling words. She never let them see her discouragement. Around them, she was confident and encouraging. She told them they could be anything they wanted to be. Her mother noticed that Amara was quieter than usual lately. One evening while washing dishes together, her mother asked if everything was okay at school. Amara said yes, everything was fine. Her mother looked at her with tired, knowing eyes. "You can tell me if something is wrong," she said in Spanish. Amara just hugged her and said, "I know, Mama, I'm okay." She couldn't add to her mother's worries. Her parents carried enough weight already, so Amara continued her routine. Wake up early, help get Miguel and Rosa ready, pack lunches for everyone, walk to school, keep her head down, sit in the back, stay quiet, go home, help her siblings, do homework, write in her notebooks, sleep, repeat, day after day, week after week. She told herself it was only for a few more years. Then she would graduate and go to college on scholarships and loans. Then her life would begin. For now, she just had to survive. But survival was getting harder. Each time Ms. Henderson looked through her, each time her hand was ignored, each time another student received praise for the same ideas Amara had, something inside her grew heavier. She was carrying a weight that no one could see. The weight of being invisible. The weight of knowing her voice didn't matter to the one person whose job was to hear it. The weight of watching other students shine while she was kept in the shadows. Amara didn't know that everything was about to change. She didn't know that the silence she had wrapped around herself like armor was about to crack. She couldn't see that sometimes the quietest voices, when they finally speak, are the ones that echo the loudest. All she knew as she sat in her back corner desk on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon was that she was tired. So very tired of being invisible. Ms. Henderson stood at the front of the classroom with a stack of papers in her hands. It was a Wednesday in late October and the afternoon sun came through the windows, making the room warm and bright. Students were settling into their seats, still talking about lunch and making plans for the weekend. Amara was already in her usual spot, notebook open, pen ready. She had learned to look busy so no one would try to talk to her. The teacher waited for everyone to quiet down. She had that look on her face, the one she got when she was about to announce something important. When the room was finally silent, she smiled. "Class, I'm excited to tell you about our next major assignment. This essay will be worth 40% of your grade this quarter, so I want everyone to take this seriously." A few students groaned. Others sat up straighter, already worried about their grades. Amara felt her stomach tighten. 40% was a lot. She needed to do well in this class. Her grade point average had to stay high if she wanted any chance at scholarships. Ms. Henderson walked around the room, placing a paper on each desk. "This assignment is different from what we've done before. I want you to write about your American experience. Tell me your story. What does it mean to you to live in this country? What opportunities have you had? What has shaped who you are?" The teacher's voice was enthusiastic. She stopped at the front again and clasped her hands together. "I want to see your authentic voice in these essays. No hiding behind formal language or trying to sound like a textbook. I want real honest writing. Show me who you really are. Make me understand your unique perspective." Amara stared at the assignment sheet. For the first time in months, she felt something stir inside her chest. A tiny flutter of hope. This was different. This wasn't about analyzing someone else's words or memorizing facts. This was about her story, her truth. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to be seen. Around the room, students were already talking about what they would write. Jennifer Crawford, who sat in the front row, was telling her friend about the mission trip she had taken to Guatemala over the summer. "I'll write about how that opened my eyes to how lucky we are," she said. Blake Morrison was thinking about writing about his grandfather, who started a successful business. "The American dream in action," he said proudly. Ms. Henderson smiled at their ideas. "Those sound wonderful. Remember, class, this is about gratitude and opportunity. This country offers so much to those who work hard. I want to see that reflected in your writing." Something about those words made Amara's excitement dim slightly. Gratitude and opportunity. Of course those things mattered. But was that the only story worth telling? What about the harder parts? What about the struggles that came with the opportunities? She pushed the doubt away. The teacher had said authentic voice. Real and honest. That's what Amara would give her. That night, after her siblings were in bed and her parents had left for their night shifts, Amara sat at the small kitchen table with her notebook. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. She stared at the blank page for a long time. Where should she start? There was so much to say. Too much, maybe? She began to write. At first, the words came slowly. Then faster. She wrote about the day her family arrived in America. She had been 6 years old, holding her mother's hand so tight her fingers hurt. Everything had been big and loud and confusing. She wrote about starting school and not understanding what anyone was saying, about the other kids laughing at her accent, about learning English by watching television and reading every book she could find. She wrote about her parents. Her father, who had been an engineer in their home country, but whose degree wasn't recognized here. Her mother, who had been a teacher but now worked in a factory. She wrote about watching them leave for work before the sun came up and return long after it set. About her father's hands, rough and scarred from the machines. About her mother's tired eyes and the way she still made sure to ask about homework every night. Amara wrote about the apartment. How all 5 of them lived in a space that felt too small. How she shared a room with both her siblings and did her homework on the kitchen table. How sometimes there wasn't quite enough food, but her parents always made sure the children ate first. How they wore secondhand clothes and couldn't afford things other kids had. But she also wrote about the good parts. The way her family stuck together. The hope that kept them going. The dreams they all had for a better future. The pride her parents felt when she brought home good grades. The way Miguel and Rosa looked up to her. The books she loved. The words that made her feel less alone. She wrote for hours, losing track of time. When she finally looked up, it was past midnight. Her hand was cramping and her eyes were tired, but she felt lighter somehow. She had filled pages and pages with her truth. It wasn't perfect yet. It was rough and needed editing. But it was real. It was honest. It was her. Over the next 2 weeks, Amara worked on her essay every spare moment she had. She wrote during lunch, sitting alone in the library. She wrote on the bus ride home. She wrote late at night when the apartment was quiet. She revised and rewrote, choosing each word carefully. She wanted it to be perfect. Not perfect in a mechanical way, but perfect in its honesty. She wrote about the invisible barriers no one talked about. How the school counselor had suggested she take easier classes even though her grades were good. How college seemed like an impossible dream because of money. How she felt caught between 2 worlds, not fully belonging in either. How she loved America, but also felt like America didn't always love her back. She wrote about shame. The shame of free lunch tickets. The shame of wearing the same clothes repeatedly. The shame of parents who worked so hard but were still looked down on. But she also wrote about refusing to be ashamed. About finding pride in survival. About the strength it took to keep going when everything felt hard. The essay became something precious to her. It was more than just an assignment. It was a piece of her heart on paper. Every sentence mattered. Every word counted. She read it out loud to herself, listening to the rhythm of the sentences. She checked and rechecked her spelling and grammar. She wanted to give Ms. Henderson no reason to mark her down on technical things. The content was what mattered most. Rosa caught her working on it one evening. Her little sister climbed into the chair next to her and asked what she was writing. Amara tried to explain in simple words. "It's a story about our family," she said. "About what it's like to be us." Rosa thought about this. "Will your teacher like it?" she asked. Amara hoped so. She really hoped so. "I think she will," she said. "She asked us to write the truth. That's what I'm doing." The night before the essay was due, Amara read through it one final time. She had titled it, "The Space Between Dreams and Reality." It was 8 pages long, every page filled with her most honest thoughts. She felt vulnerable knowing someone else would read these words. These were things she had never said out loud. But the teacher had asked for authentic voice. This was as authentic as it got. She printed the essay at the library the next morning, using the last of her printing credit. She put it in a fresh folder that she had bought specifically for this assignment. Her hands shook slightly as she placed it in her backpack. This essay felt different from anything else she had ever turned in. It wasn't just about getting a grade. It was about being seen, about being heard, about mattering. In English class that afternoon, Ms. Henderson collected the essays. She walked around the room, taking each one with a smile and a word of encouragement. When she got to Amara's desk, Amara held out her folder. The teacher took it without really looking at her. No smile, no encouragement, just a quick grab and move to the next student. Amara told herself it didn't matter. The essay would speak for itself. After class, several students gathered around Ms. Henderson's desk, talking about what they had written. Jennifer was describing her essay about gratitude. Blake was explaining his grandfather's success story. The teacher was engaged, asking questions, praising their topics. Amara walked past them toward the door. None of them noticed her leave. That night, Amara couldn't stop thinking about her essay. It was out of her hands now. Someone else would read her words, judge them, grade them. She had poured so much of herself onto those pages. What if it wasn't enough? What if the teacher didn't understand? What if her truth wasn't the kind of truth Miss Henderson wanted to hear? Her mother found her staring out the window after dinner. "What's wrong, Mia?" she asked, using her gentle voice. Amara shook her head. "Nothing, Mama, just thinking about school." Her mother sat down next to her. "You work so hard. I'm proud of you. Your papa and I were so proud." Amara leaned against her mother's shoulder, breathing in the familiar smell of factory soap and tired warmth. The waiting was hard. Ms. Henderson said it would take 3 weeks to grade all the essays. 3 weeks felt like forever. Amara tried not to think about it. She focused on her other classes, helped her siblings, went through her normal routine. But in the back of her mind, always, was the thought of those 8 pages sitting in a pile on the teacher's desk. Her truth, waiting to be read. Her voice waiting to be heard. She allowed herself to imagine good things. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Every day, Amara walked into English class wondering if this would be the day. Every day, Ms. Henderson taught the lesson without mentioning the essays. The stack of folders sat on the corner of her desk, getting smaller as she graded them during her planning period. Amara could see her own blue folder somewhere in the middle of the pile, waiting, always waiting. Finally, on a gray Monday morning in November, Ms. Henderson made an announcement. "Class, I've finished grading your essays. I must say I was impressed by many of them. Some of you really captured what I was looking for. Others," she paused, her lips pressed together in a thin line, "others need to reconsider their approach to writing." She began pulling essays from her bag, organizing them by some system only she understood. Amara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her palms were sweaty. She wiped them on her jeans under the desk where no one could see. This was it. After 3 weeks of wondering and worrying and hoping, she was finally going to know. She watched as Ms. Henderson began walking around the room, handing back essays. The teacher started at the front, as she always did. Jennifer got her essay back first. Ms. Henderson placed it on her desk with a warm smile. "Excellent work, Jennifer. Your essay about your mission trip was exactly the kind of positive perspective I was hoping to see. A solid A." Jennifer beamed, immediately turning to show her friend. Other students nearby craned their necks to see her grade. Blake got his next. "Wonderful tribute to your grandfather, Blake. This is what the American dream looks like. A minus, very well done." Blake pumped his fist in quiet celebration. More A's and B's were handed out. Each time, Ms. Henderson had something nice to say, praise about their insights, compliments on their writing, smiles and nods of approval. Amara sat in her back corner seat watching it all. The teacher was working her way through the rows. Getting closer. Amara's folder was blue, easy to spot. She saw Ms. Henderson pick it up from the stack. The teacher glanced at it and something flickered across her face. An expression Amara couldn't quite read. Then Ms. Henderson continued down the row in front of Amara, handing back more essays. Finally, she reached Amara's desk. There was no smile, no eye contact. Ms. Henderson simply dropped the folder on the desk face down and moved on to the next student without a word. Nothing. Not a single comment. Amara stared at the blue folder. Her hands were shaking as she reached for it. She couldn't flip it over yet. She wasn't ready. Around her, students were celebrating or groaning at their grades. The noise of the classroom felt far away, like she was underwater. She took a deep breath and turned the folder over. The first thing she saw was the grade, written in thick red marker across the top of the first page. D-. For a moment, Amara couldn't breathe. D-. She blinked, thinking maybe she was seeing it wrong. But no, there it was, large and red and final. D- below the grade were the words that cut even deeper. Lacks authenticity, overly dramatic. American experience requires proper perspective and gratitude. Reeks of victimhood mentality. See me after class. Amara's eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here, not now. She blinked them back hard and forced herself to look at the rest of the essay. Red ink covered almost every page. So much red it looked like the pages were bleeding. Comments in the margins. Words circled. Entire paragraphs marked through. On the paragraph where she had written about her parents' struggles, Ms. Henderson had written exaggerated and needs citation. Where Amara described feeling caught between two cultures, the teacher had marked unclear, thinking, and off-topic. Her description of shame and pride had been crossed out with the note inappropriate tone for academic essay 1, section where Amara wrote about her mother being followed by security guards in stores had a large red question mark next to it. In the margin, Ms. Henderson had written, unsubstantiated claim. This kind of accusation needs proof. The essay that Amara had spent 2 weeks crafting, the words she had chosen so carefully, the truth she had finally been brave enough to share, all of it was covered in red. Dismissed, rejected, graded as wrong. Her truth, according to Ms. Henderson, was worth a D-. Amara looked up. Across the room, Jennifer and Blake and others were comparing their essays, pointing at comments from the teacher, laughing about mistakes or celebrating good grades. They looked happy. Their truths had been accepted. Their voices had been heard and validated and praised. Ms. Henderson was at the front of the room now, talking about the next assignment. Her voice was cheerful, as if she hadn't just crushed something precious and fragile in Amara's chest. I hope you all learned something from this assignment. Remember, when writing about America, we need to focus on the opportunities this country provides. Negativity and complaints don't make for strong essays. Gratitude and appreciation do. Several students nodded. No one seemed to notice that Amara hadn't moved, that she was still staring at her essay, that her world had just tilted on its axis. The bell rang. Students gathered their things, still chattering about their grades. Ms. Henderson called out, Amara, remember to see me before you leave. But Amara was already moving. She shoved the essay into her backpack, grabbed her things, and headed for the door. She couldn't talk to the teacher right now. She couldn't hear whatever Ms. Henderson was going to say. She just needed to get out. She walked quickly through the hallways, not seeing where she was going. Her vision was still blurry. Her throat was tight. She made it to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Only then did she let herself breathe. Her hands were still shaking as she pulled the essay back out. She read through it again, trying to see what the teacher saw, trying to understand what was wrong with her words, but all she could see was her truth, her real, honest truth, the story of her family, the reality of her life. Nothing she had written was exaggerated. Nothing was dramatic for the sake of drama. It was just real. This was her authentic voice, exactly what the teacher had asked for. So why was it wrong? Why was her truth worth a D- when Jennifer's story about her week in Guatemala was worth an A? Amara thought about the comments. Lacks authenticity. How could her own life lack authenticity? Overly dramatic. Was her life too dramatic? Should she have pretended things were easier than they were? Reeks of victimhood mentality. She wasn't claiming to be a victim. She was just telling the truth. Wasn't there a difference? Requires proper perspective and gratitude. There was that word again. Gratitude. Ms. Henderson wanted gratitude. But Amara's essay had included gratitude. She had written about loving America, about the opportunities her family had, about their hope for the future. But she had also written about the hard parts. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the teacher only wanted to hear about the good parts. Maybe the truth was only acceptable when it was comfortable. The bathroom door opened and voices filled the space. Amara stayed quiet in her stall until they left. She couldn't face anyone right now. She looked at her phone. She still had 3 more classes today. How was she supposed to sit through 3 more classes when her chest felt like it was caving in? She thought about her parents. They had sacrificed everything so their children could have better lives. They worked themselves to exhaustion. They went without so Amara and Miguel and Rosa could have what they needed. And Amara had tried. She had worked so hard on this essay. She had been honest and vulnerable and brave. And it wasn't enough. Her story wasn't the right kind of story. The bell rang for the next period. Amara splashed cold water on her face and took a deep breath. She couldn't skip class. She couldn't give up. That's not what her parents taught her. So she went to her next class and the one after that. She took notes. She answered when called on. She went through the motions. But inside something had shifted. Something had broken. At lunch, she sat alone in the library like always. She pulled out the essay one more time. She read through Ms. Henderson's comments again, really trying to understand. The teacher had praised Jennifer's essay about her mission trip. That essay was about Jennifer realizing how lucky she was compared to poor people in another country. It was about gratitude for what she had. It made Jennifer look generous and aware. Blake's essay about his grandfather was praised too. It was about hard work paying off, about success, about achieving the American dream. It made America look good. It made the system look fair. What did Amara's essay do? It talked about struggles, about barriers, about systems that didn't always work for everyone, about the gap between the American dream and the American reality. It was honest, but maybe honesty wasn't what the teacher really wanted. Maybe she wanted comfort, validation, stories that confirmed what she already believed. Amara thought about all the times she had stayed quiet in class, all the times she had made herself invisible. She had done those things to protect herself, to avoid exactly this kind of pain. And then for one assignment she had let her guard down. She had believed it was safe to be seen. She had trusted that her authentic voice would be valued. She had been wrong. The worst part wasn't the grade, though 40% of her quarter grade was huge. The worst part was what the grade meant. It meant her truth didn't matter. It meant her experience wasn't valid. It meant that when she finally found the courage to speak, her voice was judged as wrong. Ms. Henderson had written, "See me after class" on the essay. Amara knew she would have to face the teacher eventually. She couldn't avoid her forever, but not today. Today she just needed to process this, to figure out what it meant, to decide what to do next. That night, Amara sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. Her essay was spread out in front of her, all those red marks staring back at her. She thought about rewriting it, about making it more like what the teacher wanted, about adding more gratitude and removing the hard truths, about making her life sound easier, simpler, more acceptable, but something in her resisted. If she rewrote her truth to make someone else comfortable, was it still her truth? If she had to change her authentic voice to be heard, was it still authentic? The teacher had asked for honest writing. Amara had given honest writing. It wasn't her fault that her honesty was uncomfortable. For the first time in a long time, Amara felt something besides hurt. She felt angry. Not loud, explosive anger, quiet, burning anger, the kind that settled deep in your bones and didn't go away. Her story mattered. Her truth was valid. And a D- with red ink all over it didn't change that. It just meant the person grading couldn't see it. Or wouldn't see it. Maybe there was a difference. Maybe there wasn't. Either way, Amara's truth was still true. The next 2 days passed in a fog. Amara went to school. She sat in her classes. She came home. She helped her siblings with homework. She did everything she was supposed to do. But she felt disconnected from all of it, like she was watching her own life from somewhere far away. Her parents noticed something was wrong, but they didn't press. They were too tired from their own battles to dig into hers. Miguel asked once if she was okay. She smiled and said yes. Rosa gave her an extra long hug at bedtime. That almost made her cry. In English class, Amara avoided looking at Ms. Henderson. The teacher had stopped her after class on Tuesday, reminding her that they needed to talk about the essay. Amara mumbled something about having to catch her bus and left quickly. On Wednesday, Ms. Henderson tried again. Amara said she had a meeting with another teacher. She knew she couldn't avoid this conversation forever. But she wasn't ready yet. She didn't trust herself to speak without her voice breaking. The D- sat in her grade book like a stone, 40% of the quarter. It pulled her English grade from a B+ to a C. AC would hurt her grade point average. Scholarships looked at grade point averages. Colleges looked at grade point averages. One essay, one teacher's opinion, and suddenly Amara's future felt less secure. The unfairness of it burned in her chest. Thursday morning started like any other day. Amara got Miguel and Rosa ready for school. She made lunches. She walked to the bus stop. She went through the motions. At school, she drifted from class to class. In third period history, they were learning about the civil rights movement. The teacher showed videos of people marching, protesting, speaking up against injustice. Amara watched and felt that burning in her chest grow hotter. Those people had refused to stay silent. They had demanded to be heard. And things had changed, but that was history. Big, important history. Amara's situation was small. Just one student and one teacher and one unfair grade. It wasn't the same. Was it lunch period came? Amara usually spent it in the library, but today the library was closed for some event. She ended up in the cafeteria, finding an empty table in the corner. She pulled out her sandwich and tried to be invisible, like always. The cafeteria was loud with hundreds of conversations happening at once. Usually Amara tuned it all out. But today, one conversation cut through the noise. A few tables away, Jennifer Crawford was talking with two other students. Amara recognized them from English class. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "I'm so glad Henderson liked my essay," Jennifer was saying. "My mom said she's going to frame it. An A on a major assignment from Henderson is like a big deal." One of her friends agreed. "She's tough. My sister had her a few years ago and said the same thing. If Henderson gives you an A, you earned it." They laughed about something Amara couldn't hear. Then Jennifer's voice got clearer again. "Henderson told me my essay was refreshing. She said she's so tired of all the complaints. Like, be grateful you're here, you know? America is amazing. Not everyone appreciates that." The words hit Amara like a slap. She sat very still, her sandwich forgotten in her hands. Be grateful you're here. Not everyone appreciates that. Was Jennifer talking about her? Had Ms. Henderson talked to Jennifer about other students' essays? About Amara's essay? The conversation continued. "Some people just have a victim mentality," one of Jennifer's friends said. "Like bad things happen to everyone. You can't just complain about it." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly." Henderson said the same thing. She said she tries to encourage positive thinking, but some students just want to focus on the negative. Amara couldn't breathe. The cafeteria felt too small, too loud, too bright. She stood up, grabbed her things, and walked out. Her legs carried her down the hallway around a corner, to an empty stairwell where no one would see her. She sat down on the steps and put her head in her hands. Be grateful. Stop complaining. Victim mentality. The words spun in her head, mixing with Ms. Henderson's red ink comments. Lacks authenticity. Overly dramatic. Reeks of victimhood. Was that really what her teacher thought? That Amara was just complaining? That she wasn't grateful? That telling the truth about her life meant she was playing victim? Amara thought about her parents. They worked 16-hour days. They lived in a tiny apartment. They wore old clothes and ate simple food so their children could have more. They never complained. They never asked for help. They just kept working, kept hoping, kept pushing forward. Was that not being grateful? Was survival not enough? She thought about herself. She studied hard. She helped her siblings. She stayed out of trouble. She tried to be invisible so she wouldn't be a burden to anyone. She had written one honest essay about her real life, and that made her ungrateful. That made her a complainer. That made her someone with a victim mentality. The anger that had been burning quietly in her chest for 2 days suddenly blazed hotter. This wasn't fair. None of this was fair. She had done exactly what the teacher asked. Write your truth. Use your authentic voice, be honest. And when she did, her truth was graded as wrong. Her voice was judged as too negative. Her honesty was marked down as victimhood. But Jennifer's truth was praised. Blake's truth was celebrated. Why? Because their truths were comfortable. Because their stories made Ms. Henderson feel good. Because they confirmed what she wanted to believe about America, about opportunity, about how the world worked. Amara had stayed silent for so long. She had made herself small. She had swallowed every microaggression, every dismissive look, every time she was overlooked or ignored. She had told herself it didn't matter, that she just needed to survive until graduation, that speaking up would only make things worse, and then she had spoken up. Just once, one essay, 8 pages of honest truth, and she was right. Speaking up had made things worse. Her grade suffered. Her teacher labeled her as having a victim mentality. Other students were talking about people who complained too much, possibly about her. Staying silent would have been safer. But something had changed in Amara over the past 2 days. The pain had transformed into something else. Clarity, maybe. Or determination. She realized that staying silent wasn't protection. It was erasure. Every time she made herself invisible, she was agreeing that her story didn't matter, that her truth wasn't valid, that her voice shouldn't be heard. Ms. Henderson had the power in that classroom. She had the grade book, the red pen, the authority. She could mark Amara down, dismiss her words, label her perspective as wrong. But the teacher couldn't change reality. Amara's life was what it was. Her struggles were real. Her family's sacrifices were real. The barriers they faced were real. A D- didn't change any of that. It just meant Ms. Henderson didn't want to see it or couldn't see it. Maybe the teacher genuinely believed that Amara was being dramatic. Maybe she truly thought that focusing on struggles meant lacking gratitude. Maybe in Ms. Henderson's world, where everything had always worked out, where systems had always supported her, where doors had always opened, maybe in that world, struggle did seem like a choice, like a negative attitude, like victimhood. But Amara lived in a different world, a world where working hard didn't always mean success, where playing by the rules didn't guarantee fair treatment, where being smart and trying your best sometimes wasn't enough. That world was just as real as Ms. Henderson's world. More real, actually, because more people lived in it. Amara thought about all the other students who had probably sat in Ms. Henderson's class over 15 years. How many of them had stories like hers? How many had tried to share their truth and been told it was wrong? How many had gotten that D- with red ink everywhere, marking their lives as inauthentic, overly dramatic, lacking proper perspective? And how many had just accepted it? How many had rewritten their truth to make the teacher comfortable? How many had learned to stay silent, to make themselves small, to only share the parts of their story that didn't make anyone uncomfortable? Amara realized she had a choice. She could do what she had always done. Stay quiet, accept the unfair grade, rewrite the essay to say what Ms. Henderson wanted to hear, graduate and get out and never think about this again. That was the safe choice. The smart choice, probably. Or she could do something different. She could refuse to accept that her truth was worth a D-. She could speak up again, louder this time. She could make noise instead of staying invisible. That choice was scary. It would be hard. It might not change anything. It might make things worse. But Amara thought about her parents again. They had left everything they knew to come to a country where they didn't speak the language, where their education didn't count, where they had to start over from nothing. They made that choice because they believed in something better, not because it was easy, because it mattered. She thought about Miguel and Rosa. What was she teaching them by staying silent? That their stories didn't matter? That they should make themselves small to avoid conflict? That the truth was only valuable when people in power agreed with it? Is that what she wanted them to learn? She thought about herself. Who did she want to be? The girl who stayed invisible? Or the girl who refused to be erased? For 16 years, she had been the first one. Maybe it was time to try being the second. The bell rang for 5th period. Amara stood up from the stairwell steps. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. It terrified her. But staying silent terrified her more now, because she had learned something important over the past 2 days. Silence didn't protect her. It just made her disappear. And she was tired of disappearing. She walked through the hallway with her head up instead of down. Students passed her, not noticing her like always. But Amara noticed herself. She felt different. Stronger, maybe. Or just more awake. Like she had been sleepwalking for years and had finally opened her eyes. She didn't go to fifth period. Instead, she walked to the main office. Her hands were shaking, but her steps were steady. The secretary looked up when she entered. "Can I help you?" she asked. Amara took a deep breath. "Yes," she said, her voice clearer than she expected. "I need to speak with Principal Chen. It's important." The secretary studied her for a moment. "What is this regarding?" Amara met her eyes. "It's about discrimination and unfair grading and a teacher who doesn't want to hear the truth." The secretary's eyebrows went up. "I see. Please have a seat. I'll let Dr. Chen know you're here." Amara sat in one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area. Her heart was still racing. She couldn't believe she was doing this. But she was. She was really doing this. After all these months, all these years of silence, she was finally speaking up. Not with an essay that could be marked with red ink. With her voice in person, where she couldn't be dismissed or ignored or graded as wrong. She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing would change. Maybe she would make things worse for herself. Maybe she was making a huge mistake. But for the first time in a long time, Amara felt like herself. Not invisible, not small, just real. Just present, just here. And that had to count for something. It had to. The weight felt endless. Amara sat in the plastic chair, watching the clock on the wall tick forward. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Her courage was starting to fade. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should just leave and forget the whole thing. But before she could talk herself out of it, the secretary called her name. "Amara, Dr. Chen can see you now." Dr. Chen's office was small but warm. The walls were covered with photos of students and certificates. The principal herself was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She gestured for Amara to sit in the chair across from her desk. "The secretary said you wanted to discuss something important." "What's going on?" Amara's mouth was dry. Now that she was here, actually sitting in the principal's office, the words felt stuck in her throat. Dr. Chen waited patiently, not rushing her. Finally, Amara found her voice. "It's about Ms. Henderson, my English teacher, and an essay I wrote, and..." She paused, trying to organize her thoughts. "And how I think she graded me unfairly because of who I am." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Her expression was serious but not unkind. "That's a serious concern. Can you tell me more?" "Start from the beginning," so Amara did. She told Dr. Chen about the assignment. About how Ms. Henderson had asked for authentic voices and honest truth. About how Amara had spent 2 weeks writing about her real life, her real experiences. About how she had been vulnerable and brave and tried to do exactly what was asked. Her voice shook at times, but she kept going. She pulled the essay from her backpack, all those pages covered in red ink, and placed them on the principal's desk. She showed Dr. Chen the grade, the comments. She explained how her essay had been marked as lacking authenticity when it was about her own life. How her truth had been called overly dramatic and accused of having a victimhood mentality. Then Amara did something that surprised even herself. She pulled out her phone and showed Dr. Chen the grades of other students that she had seen. Jennifer's A for her essay about her mission trip, Blake's a- for his grandfather's success story. She had taken photos of the assignment rubric that Ms. Henderson had handed out at the beginning. The one that said content and authenticity were the most important factors. "I checked my essay against the rubric," Amara said, her voice getting stronger. "My grammar is good. My writing is clear. My structure follows what she taught us. The only place I could have lost points is content. And the content she marked down was my actual life, my real experiences. How can my own truth lack authenticity?" Dr. Chen studied the essay carefully, reading through Ms. Henderson's comments. Her frown deepened as she read. When she looked up, her expression was troubled. "You mentioned you think this might be about who you are. Can you explain what you mean?" Amara took a deep breath. This was the hardest part, the part where she had to say out loud what she had been thinking. "I'm not like the other students in that class. My family doesn't have money. We're immigrants. I wear the same clothes every week. I get free lunch. And Ms. Henderson she's never really seen me. She doesn't say my name right. She ignores me when I raise my hand. She never praises my work even when it's good," she continued, the words coming faster now. "And this essay I wrote about real things. About my parents working hard but still struggling. About feeling caught between two worlds. About barriers and challenges. But she marked all of that as wrong. As complaining. As victim mentality. Meanwhile, other students wrote about being grateful and achieving dreams, and those essays got A's. It's like the only truth she wants to hear is the comfortable truth. The truth that makes America look good, not the truth that shows it's complicated. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you have any other examples of how Ms. Henderson has treated you differently?" Amara did. She had been keeping mental notes for months, not really knowing why. Now she understood. She told Dr. Chen about the mispronounced name. The ignored raised hands. The group projects where she was always left over. The comments about vocational training and not everyone being college material. The principal took notes as Amara spoke. When she finished, Dr. Chen said, "I need to look into this more thoroughly. Would you be willing to let me keep your essay for a few days? And would you be comfortable if I spoke with other people about this confidentially?" Amara nodded. Now that she had started, she couldn't stop. "There's something else. I heard some students talking at lunch. They said Ms. Henderson told them she was tired of complaints. That people need to be more grateful. I think she might have been talking about my essay." With other students, Dr. Chen's frown deepened. That would be a violation of student privacy. "Do you remember exactly what you heard?" Amara repeated the conversation as best she could remember. Dr. Chen wrote it all down. Then she looked at Amara with something like respect in her eyes. "I want you to know that coming here took courage. Speaking up isn't easy, especially when you're worried about grades and consequences. I'm going to take your concerns seriously. I'm going to investigate this properly. That means I'll need to talk to Ms. Henderson, review her grading patterns, possibly speak with other students. It might take some time." "What happens to my grade?" Amara asked. "Can I rewrite the essay?" Dr. Chen shook her head. "Don't rewrite anything yet, not until we sort this out. I don't want you to feel pressured to change your truth. Your essay should be graded on its merits as writing, not on whether the teacher likes the content. If there's been unfair grading, we'll address it." As Amara left the office, she felt strange. Lighter in some ways, but also scared. She had set something in motion that she couldn't control. What if nothing changed? What if she got in trouble for reporting a teacher? What if Ms. Henderson found out and made things worse? But it was done now. She had spoken. She couldn't take it back. And deep down, she didn't want to. The next few days were tense. Amara went to English class and Ms. Henderson acted normal, which somehow made things worse. Did the teacher know? Was she being investigated? Amara couldn't tell. She did her classwork and stayed quiet like always. But inside, she was different. She had found her voice. Even if nothing changed, at least she had tried. On Tuesday of the following week, Ms. Henderson was absent. A substitute teacher ran the class. The same thing happened Wednesday and Thursday. Students speculated about where she was. Some said she was sick. Others wondered if it was a family emergency. Amara didn't say anything, but she wondered if it was connected to her visit to the principal's office. On Friday, Amara was called to Dr. Chen's office again. This time, 2 other adults were there. The vice principal, Mr. Rodriguez, and the head of the English department, Mrs. Kim. All 3 looked serious. Amara's stomach dropped. Was she in trouble? Dr. Chen spoke first. "Amara, thank you for coming. We want to update you on what we've found. After you spoke with me, we began a review of Ms. Henderson's grading practices. We looked at all her classes, not just yours. We examined her grade distributions, read through student work, and compared her grading to the rubrics she provided." Mrs. Kim continued. "What we found was concerning. There's a clear pattern. Students of color and students from lower income backgrounds consistently receive lower grades on subjective assignments compared to their white, affluent peers. Even when the quality of work is similar or better, there's a disparity. Your essay isn't the only one that was marked down unfairly. It's part of a larger pattern." Mr. Rodriguez added, "We also spoke with several other students confidentially. Some confirmed that Ms. Henderson has made comments similar to what you described. Comments about being grateful, about not complaining, about some students not appreciating opportunities. When these comments are consistently directed at students from certain backgrounds, that's a problem. A big problem." Dr. Chen looked directly at Amara. "We brought Ms. Henderson in and showed her our findings. At first she was defensive. She insisted she was just trying to maintain high standards and encourage positive thinking. But when faced with the data, the pattern was undeniable. She couldn't explain why students like you consistently received lower grades while students like Jennifer Crawford received higher ones, even when your work was objectively better. Amara could barely breathe. They believed her. They had investigated and found evidence. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't being too sensitive. There really was a pattern. There really was unfair treatment. Mrs. Kim spoke again. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about Ms. Henderson being intentionally cruel. I think she genuinely believes she's doing the right thing. But her beliefs about what constitutes a good American story, about what perspective is proper, about who deserves praise and who needs correction, those beliefs are biased. And those biases have real consequences for students like you. Dr. Chen continued. Ms. Henderson has been removed from teaching while she undergoes mandatory training on cultural competency and implicit bias. The school board is also reviewing her employment status. That decision will be made at a higher level. But I wanted you to know that your concerns were valid. What happened to you was wrong, and we're taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen to other students. What about my essay? Amara asked quietly. What about my grade? Dr. Chen smiled for the first time. We had 3 other English teachers read your essay without knowing anything about the situation. They read it using Ms. Henderson's own rubric. All 3 gave it an A or A+. Your writing is strong, your voice is authentic, and your content is honest and well-developed. The grade you received was not reflective of your work. We're changing it in the system. You'll receive an A+ for that assignment. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief, maybe. Vindication. Proof that her truth mattered. That her voice was worth hearing. That she wasn't wrong to speak up. But Dr. Chen wasn't done. There's more. We're implementing new policies school-wide. All subjective grading will now be reviewed by department heads to check for bias. We're creating a student advocacy program where students can report concerns about unfair treatment without fear of retaliation, and we're requiring all teachers to undergo training on cultural competency and recognizing their own biases. Mr. Rodriguez added, your courage in speaking up has created change beyond just your own situation. Other students will benefit from this. The system will be better because you refuse to stay silent. Amara didn't know what to say. She had just wanted her essay to be graded fairly. She had just wanted her truth to be seen as valid. She hadn't expected any of this. Thank you, she finally managed. Thank you for listening, for believing me, for actually doing something. Dr. Chen stood and walked around the desk. She put a hand on Amara's shoulder. No, thank you. Speaking up against unfairness, especially when you're in a vulnerable position, takes incredible courage. You did something brave and important. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your truth doesn't matter, or that speaking up makes you a complainer. Your voice is valuable. Your story matters. Never forget that. As Amara left the office, she felt different than she had 3 weeks ago. Stronger, more solid, like she took up more space in the world. She had been invisible for so long, making herself small, staying quiet. But she had learned something crucial. Silence didn't protect her. Speaking up did. Not because it was easy or safe, but because truth, even uncomfortable truth, especially uncomfortable truth, needed to be told. And sometimes if you were brave enough to tell it, people would listen, and things could change. News spread through Lincoln High the way news always does, fast and twisted. By Monday, everyone had heard some version of what happened. Some students said Ms. Henderson had been fired for being racist. Others heard she had quit. A few claimed she was on medical leave. The truth was somewhere in between, but Amara stayed quiet about the details. It wasn't her story to tell anymore. It was bigger than her now. Walking through the hallways felt different. Some students looked at her with new curiosity. Others avoided her eyes. A few people she barely knew came up to her and said things like, I heard what you did, or, that was brave. Amara didn't know how to respond to any of it. She just nodded and kept moving. She had never wanted attention. She still didn't. But she was learning that standing up for yourself sometimes meant being seen, whether you wanted to be or not. A new English teacher took over Ms. Henderson's classes. Mr. Thompson was younger, maybe in his early 30s, with an easy smile and a completely different energy. On his first day, he went around the room and carefully learned everyone's names. When he got to Amara, he asked her to correct him until he said it right. It took 3 tries, but he got it. Such a small thing. But it mattered. Mr. Thompson's teaching style was different too. He asked questions that didn't have single right answers. He encouraged debate and different perspectives. When they discussed books, he wanted to know what students really thought, not just what they were supposed to think. Amara found herself slowly raising her hand more often. Not every day, not even every week, but sometimes, and when she spoke, Mr. Thompson listened. He never dismissed her ideas or marked them as wrong just because they were uncomfortable. 3 weeks after Ms. Henderson left, Dr. Chen called Amara to her office again. This time the meeting was different. The principal's expression was excited rather than serious. "I have something to ask you," Dr. Chen said. "The school's literary magazine is putting together their winter issue. They want to publish student work that shows authentic voices and real experiences. Would you be willing to let them publish your essay?" Amara's first instinct was to say no. The essay was so personal, so vulnerable. Did she really want hundreds of students reading her private thoughts? Reading about her family's struggles? Seeing her pain on the page? But then she thought about why she had written it in the first place. To be seen. To be heard, to matter. Publishing it would do all of those things, just on a bigger scale. "Can I think about it?" Amara asked. Dr. Chen nodded. "Of course. Take your time. But I want you to know that I've read it several times now and I think it's powerful. I think other students need to read it. Students who feel invisible like you did. Students who think their stories don't matter. You could help them realize they're not alone." That night, Amara talked to her parents about it. They sat at the kitchen table after dinner, Miguel and Rosa watching TV in the living room area. Amara explained the whole situation, everything she hadn't told them before. About the unfair grade. About speaking up. About the investigation. About the offer to publish her essay. She watched their faces carefully, worried they might be upset that she had made waves or drawn attention to the family. Her father was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough and calloused from factory work. "Mija," he said in Spanish, "we came here so you could have a voice, so you could stand up for yourself in ways we couldn't. You did that. I'm proud of you." Her mother's eyes were wet with tears. "So proud," she whispered. "So very proud." The next day, Amara told Dr. Chen yes, they could publish the essay. Yes, she was ready for other people to read her truth. Yes, she was brave enough to be that visible. The literary magazine came out in December, right before winter break. Amara saw students reading it in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the library. She tried not to watch their reactions, but sometimes she couldn't help it. Some students looked thoughtful. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked confused, like they had never considered that life could be hard for their classmates in ways they didn't see. The responses started coming in through email and social media. Some were positive. A girl from her history class sent a message saying, "I felt the same way about my life but didn't know how to say it. Thank you for finding the words." A student from another grade wrote, "Your essay made me realize I've been taking things for granted. Thank you for opening my eyes." But not all responses were kind. Someone left a printed copy of the essay in her locker with "victim" written across it in red marker. A few students made comments about people who can't stop complaining. Someone created a fake social media account and sent her messages about being ungrateful. Amara's hands shook when she saw those messages. For a moment, she wondered if publishing the essay had been a mistake. But then more messages came, real ones from real people. A sophomore boy wrote, "My family is struggling too. I thought I was the only one. Your essay made me feel less alone." A senior girl said, "I had Ms. Henderson 2 years ago and she made me feel like my perspective was wrong too. Thank you for speaking up. You helped me realize it wasn't just me. Teachers reached out too." Mrs. Kim from the English department asked if Amara would be willing to talk to a committee about improving how teachers assess student work. 2 other teachers thanked her for bringing attention to bias they hadn't recognized in their own teaching. "You've made us think harder about fairness," one wrote. "That's a gift." The local newspaper heard about the story and wanted to write an article. Dr. Chen asked Amara if she would be willing to be interviewed. Amara said yes, but only if they didn't use her full name or show her photo. She agreed to be Amara S., a student at Lincoln High. The article came out in January. It talked about implicit bias in education, about the importance of diverse perspectives, about students finding the courage to speak up against unfairness. After the article, more things started happening. The school board invited Amara to speak at a meeting about student advocacy. She was terrified, but she did it. She talked about what it felt like to be invisible, about how silence wasn't protection, it was erasure, about how one teacher's bias had almost convinced her that her truth didn't matter. The board members listened. Some took notes. One woman in the back row wiped away tears. In February, Amara received an email that changed everything. It was from the director of a summer writing program at a nearby college. "I read your essay in the Lincoln High Literary Magazine," the email said. "Your voice is powerful and your story is important. I would like to offer you a full scholarship to our 6-week intensive writing program this summer. We need voices like yours in the world of literature." Amara read the email 3 times, not believing it was real. A full scholarship. 6 weeks of writing workshops with real writers, all because she had refused to stay silent. All because she had insisted her truth was valid even when someone with power said it wasn't. She showed her parents the email. Her mother cried. Her father picked her up and spun her around like he used to when she was little. Miguel and Rosa cheered. "See?" her father said, still speaking Spanish. "Your voice matters. We always knew it. Now the world knows it too." The spring semester brought more changes. The student advocacy program that Dr. Chen had mentioned became real. Amara was asked to be one of the founding members. She met with other students who had experienced bias or unfair treatment. They created guidelines for how to report problems. They worked with teachers to develop better assessment practices. They organized workshops on cultural competency for both staff and students. It was hard work. Some people resisted. Some teachers felt defensive. Some students didn't want to hear about bias or privilege or fairness, but slowly, gradually, things began to shift. More diverse voices were heard in classrooms. More perspectives were valued in discussions. More truths were recognized as legitimate, even when they were uncomfortable. Amara never became popular in the traditional sense. She still ate lunch alone sometimes. She still wore the same rotation of clothes. She still lived in a tiny apartment and worked hard and worried about money. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She had learned that visibility wasn't about everyone liking you or everyone agreeing with you. It was about refusing to be erased, about insisting that your story mattered, about speaking your truth even when your voice shook. In May, at the school's academic award ceremony, Amara received an award for courage and advocacy. She had to walk up on stage in front of hundreds of people, teachers and students and parents. Her hands were sweating and her heart was pounding. But when she got to the podium, she looked out at all those faces and felt something unexpected. Not fear, strength. "A year ago," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "I was invisible. I stayed silent because I thought that would keep me safe. I made myself small because I believed that's what I had to do to survive. But silence didn't protect me. It just made me disappear." She paused, finding her courage. "When I finally spoke up, it was terrifying. I didn't know if anyone would listen. I didn't know if anything would change. But I learned something important. Sometimes you have to speak even when you're scared. Sometimes you have to tell your truth even when people say it's wrong. Sometimes you have to refuse to be invisible even when being seen is hard." She looked directly at the audience. "My story isn't special. There are students in this school right now who feel invisible, who think their voices don't matter, who stay silent because they're afraid. I want them to know something. Your story matters. Your truth is valid. Your voice deserves to be heard, and if you're brave enough to speak, I promise you there are people who will listen." The applause was loud and long. Amara saw her parents in the audience, her father's face proud, her mother's eyes wet with tears. She saw Miguel and Rosa cheering wildly. She saw Mr. Thompson giving her a thumbs up. She saw other students, ones she didn't even know, standing and clapping. But the moment that mattered most came after the ceremony. A young girl, maybe a freshman, came up to her nervously. She was small and quiet and looked like she wanted to disappear. "I read your essay," the girl said quietly, "and I just wanted to say thank you. I have a teacher who makes me feel invisible too. I was going to just stay quiet until I graduated. But after hearing you speak, I think maybe I should say something. Maybe my voice matters too." Amara looked at this girl and saw herself from a year ago, small, scared, silent. She put her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Your voice absolutely matters," she said firmly. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And if you need help speaking up, I'm here. You're not alone." That's when Amara realized the full weight of what she had done. By refusing to stay silent, she hadn't just changed her own situation. She had created space for others to speak. She had shown that one voice, even a quiet one, even a scared one, could matter, could create change, could make things better for the people who came after. On the last day of school, Amara cleaned out her locker. She found old papers and forgotten pens and the crumpled lunch bag from months ago. At the bottom was the original copy of her essay, the one covered in Ms. Henderson's red ink. She almost threw it away, but then she stopped. She folded it carefully and put it in her backpack, not as a reminder of pain, as a reminder of courage, of the day she decided her truth was worth fighting for, of the moment she stopped being invisible. When she returned home at the end of summer, she was different, not just because of the writing program, though that had changed her, but because she had learned the most important lesson of all. Silence is a choice. Invisibility is a choice. She had spent most of her life choosing them because they felt safer, but safe wasn't the same as good. Safe wasn't the same as right. Safe wasn't the same as true. As junior year started, Amara walked into Lincoln High with her head up. She still wore simple clothes. She still worried about money. She still worked hard and helped her siblings and carried the weight of her family's struggles. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She had found her voice. And now that she had found it, she had learned how to use it. Not just for herself. For anyone who needed someone to speak when they couldn't. For anyone who felt erased or dismissed or told their truth didn't matter. The poor student girl had stayed silent for so long. But when her racist teacher graded her truth as wrong, something inside her refused to accept it. And in that refusal, in that moment of saying, no, my story matters, everything changed. Not just for her. For everyone who would come after her. Everyone who needed to know that speaking up, even when your voice shakes, even when you're scared, even when you're not sure anyone will listen, is always, always worth it. Because truth matters. Justice matters. And sometimes one voice is all it takes to start changing the world.